Okay, we're going to get started. Welcome to Natick 101, session number 4. I'm going to kick us off and just give you guys some brief intros and give you guys a sense of the agenda. I'm Jay Paddock. I'm the communications director. I'm going to walk you through the first 30 minutes, and then I'm going to hand it to Troy Smith, our equity, inclusion, and outreach director as well. Then we're going to have 30 minutes of Q&A, so we'll be as regimented as we possibly can be. As far as logistics, I mentioned the 30, 30, 30 as far as the minutes. We will try to honor the folks that have a live survey to submit questions. If you go to the town's homepage, the first link is a click to the survey. So if you send anything in, if you're watching on YouTube, or if you choose to do it anonymously in the room, we'll be able to monitor and we'll read those questions and answer those. But otherwise, we'll try to keep the questions, as broad as possible. But it's a pretty modest-sized audience, so maybe we cheat a little bit and let you guys get specific. As far as the live questions I mentioned, primarily Q&A for the folks in the room. There is a link on the homepage for anyone that wants to do the old QR trick. Feel free to jump in, and you can grab a quick scan. But like I said, it's all going to drive you. Even if you go to the homepage of the website, it's the same link to the Google form. If you're in the room, we'll use the microphones, but if you're sitting at your leisure and want to submit something, feel free to. Just to give everyone a sense how communications and EIO fit into the town organization, very brief org chart. The residents ultimately sit at the top. We have a select board that are 5 representatives, and then our town administrator, he's part of the town administration. Myself and Troy, we report directly to the town administrator. We are a mighty team of one, each of us. We have a procurement office as well that's one. Otherwise, departments tend to have 2 or more folks. So just to give you a sense of how we fit in, we ultimately support all departments and report to essentially our CEO, the town administrator. I'm going to walk you through the next, say 27 minutes of communications. You can see the 8 topics up there. But kind of give you some broad sense of definitions into actually the channels that we end up to communicate with residents, and then hint at the future of what communications could be in Natick. As a way of intro, this is just a sense of my career path. I graduated in college with an anthropology degree, no particular sense to do anything. I fell into marketing for the next 20 years. I worked at ad agencies, that's the Mad Men logo, and then Staples for 8 years, and then headed over to startups, all the way from alcohol delivery to waking up the next morning with coffee. Copper Cow was a coffee company. But there was a fork in the road. I live in Natick. Interesting. How we doing on? All right, we're all set. We're good in the room. I think this is just going to toggle through. In 1 second. All right. So just to give you guys a sense, there was a fork in the road. I live in Natick. My wife's a teacher at Benham. I have a daughter who goes to Kennedy, the room we're in right now, as well as across the street at Brown. So I took my marketing career, and I said I'd rather have great work-life balance. I was fortunate with startups. A few good things happened, and I could afford to work in the town that I live. So that's kind of my career path and what brought me here to Natick as the communications director. Just one quick definition. Sometimes you hear folks talk about communications and marketing as though they're the same. Really, communications, my current job, I have to talk to all audiences, 37,000 residents, and just provide unbiased, factual information. My previous 20 years, I had to find niche audiences that were more likely to buy products or services. But this is a very different, we're trying to bring as much unbiased news to as many people as we can. So that just gives you some clarity around those 2 words that sometimes are used synonymously. I'm just going to walk you through kind of a day in the life, just to give you a sense of what my job is. For those that are movie buffs, you can look on the bottom right and get a sense of that reference. But the way my day breaks out, there's this, the blocking and tackling of maintenance. So the idea of just doing website updates, sending out notifications to residents. I'll start to go into some of the details of these channels, but just a quick kind of teaser to give you a sense of what an average day looks like. Beyond the maintenance, it's really a lot of support. So our town administrator and our departments rely on myself to publish any sort of more top-tier web pages. The departments themselves will manage their own individual web pages. I'll help out with traffic detours, road work. So I'll just get called in on an ad hoc basis where I can provide communication support. Additionally, beyond that is just any sort of public engagement opportunities. So those could be community events, survey opportunities, as well as even this Natick 101 session. We see this as a chance to engage the public. So not only am I helping present tonight, this is kind of my day job, is to organize all the other sessions that happen on a monthly basis. Two smaller items. So PR matters as well as internal communications, maybe a smaller allocation, equally as important. PR tends to come up, good or bad, and you drop everything and you deal with it. And then additionally, internal communications, and that means talking to our employees and making sure they feel communicated to. I'll walk you through some initiatives that we're doing there. And lastly, some strategic work. So working with our town administrator, and he'll tap me. For those that work more in the private sector, it's almost like that chief of staff kind of idea. It's like you're just a free agent to figure out how to help solve this project. So I just have a good working relationship with my boss, the town administrator, so I'll start to lean into something like the Johnson Future Use. I'll talk through a strategic framework that we're trying to take from corporate America and figure out what parts work for the town employees, things along those lines. I'll pause if there's like brief one-off questions, but like I said, that final half hour is when you can really kind of drill me with the hard questions. So the next slide, I'm going to build this slide over time, but I just want to show everyone all the different channels that we use to communicate. So just looking at the left part of this slide, you've got digital and traditional. So things that we can do online, you know, our website, notification systems, newsletters, social media. We probably have course corrected too far digital. Some of that's post-pandemic. I mean, I started my career in 2002, and I was in digital marketing. I was at an ad agency with 1,000 people in Boston, and I was one of 3 interactive media people. And all of a sudden, we've course corrected, and now we've leaned heavily on digital. Whereas traditional media, I won't read through that list, and I'm going to kind of walk you guys through a little bit of a slide build, where if I look at each of those channels, they might have a different ability to reach people. They might have a different level of maturity as to how much we town staff have developed that area. And then we're also prioritizing things differently. So trust me, if you look at this screen, it's not that difficult. But these are just Harvey balls to show you how complete it is. So the more complete the circle is, the higher the score is on the assessment. Less is a lower score. And if I just kind of talk about the yellow items, you can see our town website, I would say at the end of the day, it's really high on the maturity. For a municipal website, it's not an amazing website. It's a decent one. But as far as our maturity for a municipal website, it's towards the stronger one. But it still needs to be prioritized because the reach potential against this is significant. So that's one of the full circles. The notification system, that's where we have the ability to send it to SMS or email subscribers. So I'm always going to put that one in the heavy prioritization. The newsletters, they reach a ton of people. I'm just going to build the comms notes as well. I'm not going to read through those so you can see them. Our newsletters, we have 8 of them, and they're managed by our individual departments. So we have an amazing ability. Something like the Morse Library has a file off the top of my head of about 14,000 people. So passively, when you sign up for a library card, the Morse Library now has you on their email records so they can send you that newsletter on a monthly cadence, I believe. Parks and Rec, CED, newsletters are really around all the different departments. As far as the other yellow sections, reverse 911 typically tends to be the snow emergencies that you'll receive from Chief Hicks. This is something that's co-managed by myself and the police department. A ton of reach, #1 reach channel, quite frankly, because we access you if you sign up, but we also have public databases because it's emergency in nature. VMS signboards, these are the yellow flashing signboards that kind of direct you around our town if there's various road work. Think about it. It's an amazing reach channel. You literally find out about water bans, about detours. We could probably do a better job telling you sooner in other ways, but it's amazing. They're like billboard advertising. It's Times Square. So that's an area where I don't personally manage that, but I assist with the DPW and police. They're ultimately the owners of those. The last one that I'll talk to is kind of the mailers and bills. So on a quarterly basis, you get your real estate, you'll get your water bills. You know, you might sign up for e-bills or to get them digitally, but we get quite a few people that we're sending bills. And I would say this is an untapped opportunity where I need to do a better job figuring out, without any additional postage costs to taxpayers, how can we put inserts in there and get you to do things over time. So that's something that I prioritized. So you see another yellow piece here. The only red checkbox I haven't touched on is the influencers notion. So this, you know, think of it as like a TikTok selling you jewelry, but instead these are residents who have an ability to influence and be advocates in their smaller neighborhoods. So there's a couple different things that are in preliminary stages, but I would say that this is a new channel in future. But I do think it's this idea of finding those people that can be sort of that central hub into smaller niche audiences around our community. I suspect we might come back to this if folks have questions once we get to the Q&A. Flash vote. I'm looking around the room. I think a few folks know about it. It's made the headlines in recent opportunity, but this is a survey. Think of it as a Google form or a Survey Monkey with quite a few features behind it. Every time you do a Google form or Survey Monkey, you don't have a panel to hit and kind of build off of that. Flash vote. I encourage you. It's featured on the homepage fairly prominently since around September of this year. We did our first survey in October, and we're going to plan on doing monthly surveys. It's our ability to allow you to sit at home and participate and ultimately give us feedback. We featured a select board meeting last night around a very charged topic where folks have very strong opinions, and we can allow you an opportunity to give scaled feedback. It's simple. These are five questions-ish. It takes you 1 to 2 minutes. It's a startup who only works with government clients, and I've been pretty impressed with what their company's able to do. But we'll see in the future. You know, anticipate the Community Preservation Act that's currently slated for January, most likely. But we'll be talking about the override, the Johnson future use. If it's big and important in our town, we owe it to residents to give them an easy way to get engaged. If you show up to meetings like folks are doing right now, that's awesome, but it's the other folks who don't have to show up and can still hear their voice or have their voice heard. I'm going to walk through 2 slides around the website. Like I mentioned, this is a pretty important key area. On the left side, you were just looking at monthly sessions. Imagine when you come to our homepage, you are a session. If you look at multiple pages, those are individual page views. Typically, anyone that comes to our website does about 2 to 3 page views. It's pretty transactional information. I need the trash pickup. I need the, you know, and it's these areas. The next slide, I'll walk you through sort of the top pages that are viewed. It's pretty consistent. We've grown by 20%. This isn't, I used to work more in e-commerce where these numbers you live and you breathe, and this is, but here it's, you know, will people come to our website and are we giving them decent value? A lot of it's pay your bills, find out about a government meeting otherwise. It's been growing. You can see the peaks on the elections. You can see the website redesign we did in July of 23. So, you know, it's a decent glamour shot before and after. But at the end of the day, it doesn't necessarily result in more people coming to our website. It's really the content. So that's sort of the hypothesis at the bottom. Our content that we've been publishing to the website has increased fairly significantly since I joined. I haven't mentioned it yet, but I've been around for about 2.5 years in this role. So since I came on board, I would just say the departments, they get a ton of the credit, but I'm publishing as much as I can to get people to come back. As far as what the pages are that people are looking at, let me just explain this pie chart real briefly. This is the top 100 web pages that are viewed on our website. They account for about 80% of the total page views, kind of that classic 80-20, literally hit on 80%, 100 pages. What I did was I actually reclassed them into very normal, logical words. Service and tools to gather information, that is the 40 percentage points in blue. We're really a very informationally driven website. The 3 biggest items, bids, that's our procurement for people that are doing bids. I'm as surprised as you potentially are, but that is our top page view of people that are coming looking for RFPs and looking to participate to be awarded a bid. Our calendars, our trash and recycling, just simply coming to the homepage. That's typically anywhere from 10 to 30% of your page visits. That's your front door of your website. And I'm not going to read through all of them, but you can kind of get a sense as you go around the pie as far as what we do. The only other piece I would call out is just the transactional nature, bill payments. We're literally the tax collector. So that's where you're coming on our website. You're looking for online payments. So again, just gives you a sense of our website and how people are using it today. That you'll notice at some point later in the presentation, I'll talk about the ability just to look at the UX and get feedback. So we have every like 10 seconds, if you sit on a page, you'll get a little pop-up to tell us, what are you doing on this website? Did you find the information you were looking for? And I'm looking at those pieces of information to figure out, oh, wait a second, we're missing stuff in our navigation. We need to do this item. So that's constant feedback loop where I don't have to bother you, but as you're sitting at home using the website, you just give some UX feedback. Yeah. Sorry, there's a question in the crowd, but no, there's 2 slides around sessions and pages, so it was just a number 1 and 2. Good question. So moving us along, I'm just going to talk around website notifications. So again, this at the end of the day, when you come to our website, we're asking you to interrupt your day or do something, as opposed to pushing you the information via an email or SMS subscription. I would just tell you, literally, this is the number 1 thing to do. When I hear people say it's hard to be involved, there are no newspapers, it's harder to go outside and pick up a newspaper than it is to do essentially what Amazon does. You hit a button and subscribe. It's been featured on our homepage and it will be forever. And there's even myself walking you through a video of how to pick and choose the topics that you want. I just encourage everyone. At the end of the day, my job is to make sure that residents have the tools to stay informed, but there's also a little onus that you're going to have to potentially take the action and sign up. I was a resident for 10 years of Natick before I took this job as a communications person. I never signed up for anything, and I was content. And I wasn't necessarily informed, but that was a choice I made. And I have no one to blame. My predecessor, she was doing a fine job. I just chose not to sign up. So this is an area where I encourage everyone. I mean, this is a group I'm talking to people that are spending their nights at home on YouTube or in the Kennedy Auditorium. But when we hear neighbors talk, communications can always get better. There is no destination. We will always be trying to get better. But at the same time, there's a great opportunity to sign up for lists. They can be the number 1 list is the General Natick News. It's the front page of the USA Today. Those are the areas. There's 3 to 5 pushes that I send. I encourage you, sign up. You can drop off the meeting now and spend the rest of the meeting signing up, and you'll get more value. But if you stick around, you guys can judge how good the rest of it is. I call out on the right side just a couple areas in yellow where it is featured on our homepage, 3 different areas. Maybe I could add a 4th, but I would say that it's pretty prominent. I encourage everyone to sign up. Briefly on internal communications, I'm breaking this down on the left side into tactics, and on the right side more so strategy. Just to talk through the tactics, when I say internal communications, it's my job to talk to our employees, roughly about 500 employees on the town side. And right now we have often a lot of private companies you'll have like from the desk of the CEO on a Friday afternoon. Well, I worked with our town administrator, and now on a weekly basis, he'll film a video and have an entire summary from all the departments on what we're working on, new hires. There's a survey for our employees to ask questions, get answers. So it's just, and he films it on a Friday, and it publishes on a Monday to all of our employees across the entire town. We launched a new logo last year. We templatized documents. My job is to create how-to, because I have to teach the other departments how to fish, because I am a communications person. The DPW worker, the police, the fire, they've got a very hard job and a day job, so how can I make sure they have how-to documents so they're not becoming communication professionals? They need to do what their departments need. But they do, just to give you an example, like the police and fire, DPW, they manage their own web pages. I don't manage every web page. That would be, probably just not ideal for anyone involved. So that's kind of the how-to areas. I do have some HR items in here. I think that ultimately communications to our employees and HR have some natural synergies. In past lives, I was working pretty closely with HR, so I've been able to partner with our HR department and work on a few different items. On the strategy side, Yep, we have a question in the audience. Maybe just for the microphone. Yeah, I'll ask and answer. But yeah, on the templatized documents, this is the idea that you need a press release template with a logo, universal business cards, email signatures. So yeah, these are the ideas. When we launched our logo, we didn't have any of these. When I started, I was like, well, that's great. Where are the templates? How do I produce a PowerPoint or a Google slide? So we started to roll these out. And we try to give like some creative freedoms to departments, but at least have a common starting point. On the strategy piece, this is an iceberg. Everything above the water, that's the design. That's what you see. And that's kind of the logo work, and we have some branding areas. That 2 and 3, that's where I would say the work we're still working on. Mission, vision, values. We, the town of Natick, do not have this formally. I would say this work is 80% complete. We did a process. We involved all of the employees, and Troy's going to present town values that are internally focused, and we've announced them to the staff. I haven't fully rolled them out, but I won't steal his thunder. On the goal setting, I mean, how do we know we're doing well? And I think I'm going to talk through some different areas, but like that is the idea of having something like initiatives and having a dashboard and having it across all your areas. Like these are in the private world, like you have your earnings per share, your whatever your business metrics are, and every department has to be accountable for something. And it's not just publishing an annual report saying these are all the great things we did. It's some actionability that has red, yellow, green. Who owns it? How's it going? So that's kind of the idea there. This is going to be, I'm down to 2 slides, and I'm on time so far. This is a quick little view, and I'll just walk you through before I build it. But the y-axis, things higher and more strategic, things lower and more tactical in nature. Things towards the right on the x-axis, more modern, newer sort of areas that the future of communications might be versus more proven older matters. So just starting with the top right, everything with the size of the circle, that's the presumed impact that this work would have. I'll just mention the 2 largest circles. The strategic framework I mentioned before, again, the mission, vision, values. Mission and vision statements, they tend to get put up on a board or on a PDF. I wouldn't call those as actionable, but the values that Troy's going to walk you through, those can be, they were this year for all town staff in all of our performance appraisals. They should be in our hiring criteria. They should be in our promotion criteria. Those are what companies are doing, and the employees feel more attached. New employees feel like there's something a little different about the town of Natick. They're running a little more modern operation. That's the goal some number of years from now. The North Star surveys, this is, there's a happiness survey that could be an altruistic idea of do you feel happy and safe in Natick? But then you start to ask other questions underneath to understand the drivers and drags. And you say, do you feel that the parks are well maintained? Do you feel that the roads are kept up? And that can become an annualized survey where we can trend and see how residents feel how successful we are. This isn't my idea. This is how private America works with brand trackers and net promoter scores, and they figure out these higher level metrics, and then those align to all their business metrics. In our world, as municipal employees, we absolutely could be asking these questions and understanding it. Somerville's been doing it for a decade. There's many other cities. We might be one of the first towns, but there's no reason we shouldn't chase this work. Moving down into more tactical items, here's a fun one. Our search engine on natickma.gov is horrible. It's powered by Civic Plus. I don't want people to get too excited here because it's a little bit of garbage in, garbage out. Because when we have so many PDFs and so many end users putting things in there, it's really hard to organize. But guess who's really good at this? Google. So we'll launch a Google search engine powered by them. Civic Plus is the website vendor we use. They say they currently have about 10 clients across their roster. They probably own 50+% of the marketplace. Greenwich, Connecticut, Tempe, Arizona. These are some of the ones I've been working with, and we will launch in January. We have a working comp of it already. And Google will power the search engine. I promise you it'll be 2% better, if not more. When you look at the other bubbles in there, I mentioned the influencers. Sheer exploration on the mobile app. I'm very intrigued by what Brookline's doing with the mobile app. There's other communities. Again, I would call that exploration. I mentioned the pop-ups around the website UX, that's website usability and user experience. That is an area where I can certainly be leaning into and listening to how you feel about the website. I'm not going to mention the others in the interest of time. Everything in the bottom left, that's just day-to-day. It's the status quo. It's pretty tactical. It's pretty proven. But then in the top right, these items could be strategic, but be perceived as a little bit more old school. I mentioned the bills and the bill inserts and the mailers. That's an area where I need to really partner. We do not only the bills I referenced, but we do a census every January. That's an opportunity. We put a flyer in last year with the census. If folks remember, it's a Natick Need to Know, and we just curate it, an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. Targeted outreach, this is literally meeting people where they are. I mean, West Natick is known for not having many town meeting members associated with town meeting. I haven't really heard any strong efforts done to engage West Natick. So myself and Troy want to start to really do that and do some targeted outreach to places that can be repeatable and scalable. And then the Natick 101 sessions, we're all sitting here. These are in-person meetings, not very new, but certainly important that we need to do it. Last slide. At the end of the day, how do I stay informed? Sign up for the notifications. Please, please, please. If you're still here, you didn't listen to me. I said stop and just sign up. Staying engaged, you have an ability to vote. Not only just vote in local elections, but also the flash vote. I mean, I'm committed to it. The select board has been very receptive to it. Our town departments, I want to sign up themselves to ask surveys. Before we do something, why are we not getting some input at scale? A public meeting's great, but we're going to get tens and 50s of people. We should be getting hundreds, if not thousands, of individuals sitting at home giving us feedback. And then the ability to participate, whether or not you want to join a board and committee. I would say, let's kind of bring you slowly into that. I think sometimes we're guilty of saying, here, sign up for this board or committee. We probably have to gain the trust that we're running a really successful town and that people can contribute. But we have board seats sitting out there right now, election papers through January 7th, quite a few seats out there. So give it a shot. I think I did pretty well in the time check, and 2 minutes, but I had to do the intro too. So I'm going to hand you to Troy Smith, and then we'll come back for Q&A for the last half hour.
Thanks, Jay. It's great to be here. So I am Troy Smith, and I'm glad to be here in Natick. I serve as the Director of Equity, Inclusion, and Outreach for the township. In terms of just looking at my own journey in terms of what has brought me here, I would say community building during my teaching career played a very important role in that process. What are the things that you need to do to build community, and how can we all work together? Is something that resonated with me in terms of coming to Natick. All right, this gets to some very fundamental people and principles that keep me grounded. So this is my family, beginning with mom and dad. Dad, who's no longer with us, you were missed with love. Thank you for your service. And my mom, who has really instilled values in me to really know who you are, to have a sense of self, and to work hard. Something that she taught me greatly. All right, here are some folks that I see every day, along with mom, who's now moved up with us to Milton. My wife and my boys. They keep me grounded in so many ways. So let's talk about this transition. How did I end up in Natick? I would say for me, I was very happy as a professor In addition to being at North Shore Community College, I also taught at Cambridge College, Springfield College, UMass. I worked with youth in the John F. Kennedy Presidential Library and Museum doing public speaking. So I loved youth engagement. And for years, I always told students, make a difference, get involved. And for me, a critical fork in the road happened during this time. 2020, time of COVID, a time where the nation was captured not only by what happened to George Floyd, but other incidents, other crimes, other sad happenings. And for me, it was a matter of asking myself, even though I was doing things at the college level in terms of anti-violence work in Lynn and as well as in Boston, a lot of work in the area of violence prevention, I asked myself, what's a more direct way that I could get involved? And so those were the things that really motivated me to want to be in a place such as Natick. So, in looking at that, what are some of the things just in terms of defining what EIO is? We look at equity, ensuring everyone has access to the resources they need to thrive, inclusion, creating a place where all voices are valued and heard, outreach, something that Jay talked about, actively engaging and connecting with the community. And another word that I don't want to leave out, diversity, the variety of identities, backgrounds, and experiences that make our community unique. Shouldn't be afraid to use the word diversity. It's a beautiful thing, and it's an important thing, and it's a part of what helps to make our nation great. All right, I want to go back to the early days. Now, my time here has been, and I've been tracking it, a year and a half. So what were those early days like? And there are people that I see here that I remember seeing in those early days where part of it was listening, learning from residents, learning from leaders, getting a sense of the town, the character of the town, the history of the town. I can remember the early days of connecting with folks from the library, and I had asked about some books on Natick history, and they had a bunch of books ready for me. So I mention these points to say it's a community effort. It's a community process. And early on, I felt a sense of belonging and connection with Natick that has been very genuine and very real. And that's one of the things that sustains me during this time of challenge. I showed the picture of George Floyd, and it's very interesting because we may say that doesn't happen in Natick. And while we may not have an exact situation like that, we must be informed by the national issues, but I believe in working locally and being able to understand what's particular about Natick. For me, it's been about establishing relationships. And I just want to say there is a very significant link between the work of communications and EIO. First of all, Jay called me before I ever even arrived in Natick. That type of, being able to make those types of connections are important because there are interconnections that are important. And that's been the spirit that EIO has tried to have in terms of other departments, in terms of making connections and departments reaching out to me. I want to say this. In the work of equity and inclusion and outreach, we should not work in silos. And for me, the Natick experience has been one of integration, one of connection, and one of me having an opportunity to serve the needs within departments. No matter what department calls me, I'm going to listen and look at what are some things that we can do to bring an equity, inclusion, and outreach lens into the process. and it really makes a difference. And I want to point to this event, and this was something that happened during my third month of being in Natick, was being able to come together, and I was involved in organizing that in terms of being a central organizer there. But really, that was a tribute to Natick. That was a tribute to how people in Natick come together. And to me, that inspires me and it sustains me today. And that was very important in terms of being able to make that kind of connection and to do that celebration in terms of us being able to come together as a community. All right, let's talk about values. Now, these are, as Jay mentioned, internally focused, full rollout to come in 2025. But I have to say, when I saw these values and was involved in some early conversations, and there was, group working to develop this, that I was just so happy to hear that they were refining and developing these internal values. We welcome. Town staff is committed to supporting our community. We lead with empathy and place a strong emphasis on encouraging a wide set of opinions, perspectives, and identities. The end goal is always a strong sense of belonging. We listen. All initiatives and communications start with listening to town staff, residents, businesses, and all who call Natick home. Active listening informs priorities, establishes collaboration, and builds trust. I want to mention that last phrase, build trust. A key word in the process of citizens and residents coming together to work with municipal government. We lead. Town staff is committed to constantly planning, building, and improving our community, supporting actions aimed at accountable outcomes. Town staff strikes a balance of delivering short-term services and developing a long-term vision for what Natick can achieve. By having these as internal values that we are developing, it really grounds the work that you do. The work that I'm talking about in regards to EIO fits in well with these values. And these values lay a foundation that can help all departments. And it's very important to consider values. What do we stand for? All right. Well, here's a good example of something that brought us together. Mobile Town Hall. Here's some familiar faces. But the point with this experience is that it was able to bring town residents, staff members together and giving us an opportunity to bring services, bring information, but I would say most importantly, folks, the chance to listen, to hear what the needs are, to really gain a sense of what the challenges are and what are some of the opportunities for us to serve better. And again, to reinforce these values, listening, and this connects with Mobile Town Hall, engage directly with approximately 40 residents, acting, delivered accessible town services and information, leading, demonstrated the power of proactive community-centered outreach, result, working towards building trust and connection between residents and local government. It shows the power of being able to go where residents are, being able to make those connections. All right. This is an interesting figure. I would just ask you to look at it for a moment. When we look at the word equality and when we look at the word equity. And I'll just ask you to think about that for a moment in terms of how you might look at the two. All right. So in terms of, I'm gonna actually pose the question here. In looking at that, do you see any interesting distinctions of equity and equality? Do you see a difference in this picture? What comes to mind? Hi. Yeah. Yep. Yep. So yeah, and what do you see on the other side? What stands out? Yeah. Okay. Okay. All right. Yeah. So it's interesting looking at that. I mean, on one side you see the same stool. They have the same one. It's the same size, but everybody's not getting the same view. With equity, however, you make the necessary corrections to give everybody the chance to be able to get the view. Yes, sir.
The other thing you notice is that there's the same number of boxes on both sides, but the distribution is different.
Yeah.
To create equity.
Yeah.
And that's, requires a vision for people to understand why you want everybody to get that same view. You have to distribute it a little different.
Yeah. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your points there. Now, this is a way to take that visual to another level and to look at the wording. It's interesting. I can recall having conversations with people, not necessarily in Natick, but a lot of times we can use the two words in a very synonymous way. And while the words may look similar, as you see with the difference there of just kind of dialing the knob a little different there, the shape, you see the difference. And again, treating with equality, treating everyone the same and providing the same resources or opportunities regardless of individual differences or needs. With equity, ensuring fair treatment, access, opportunity, and advancement for all individuals while striving to identify and eliminate barriers that have prevented the full participation of some groups. So that gives us the distinction that I think is very important to consider. Now, I mention this, on one hand, it might sound like, some interesting concepts, but I will also say that this was something that fit in with a longer presentation that I did for departmental heads as well as human resources as a separate one to help us in the process of getting on the same page of looking at the terminology. So just wanted to tie that into a specific actionable initiative. All right, we get into another figure here. This one, we look at equality. Again, we go back to that word. Everyone receives the same support regardless of need. But again, as we saw before, it's inaccessible. We move to the next level or stage where we get to equity. Individuals given different support, accommodation to enable access. So we see some structural changes that are happening. People are able to get a view. But to move towards true inclusion, everyone has access. One might say in an ideal world or situation, no need for support because we're doing in a way that might fit into the category of universal accessibility, where we're able to anticipate and build it from design from the beginning. Because with accommodation, oftentimes there are degrees of accommodation that happens. So I think all those are important, and then we are able to have accessibility there with the fence, and there's a clear view for everyone. So it's just important to look at that. Now you may say, hey, where are we? I I think it's fair to be able to say that, hey, we are working there in the area of equity. We can think about accommodations. We could think about really doing that. But I would say this, and there is an accessibility working group that I've had a chance to participate in a meeting, and it's a group that I'm going to be getting more involved in. I'm having conversations, and this picture captures the idea of really trying to do it in a way that's universal, and again, doing it in a way that's integrated, and also creating a situation where departments can have that communication where we can sort of work more jointly and more of a strategic manner to look at accessibility more widely. And that's a process. I think we're at an early stage in terms of, really trying to, to get to that North Star of true inclusion. But there's a recognition that there's more to do in terms of that. All right, moving forward. Accessibility in action, removing barriers, identifying and addressing challenges that limit participation. Again, I mentioned universal design, creating spaces and systems that serve everyone. Inclusive outreach, engaging diverse residents in meaningful ways. And again, I mentioned the accessibility work group that is doing some great work, and I'm going to be working closely with them. So it's exciting to see what the possibilities are. All right. I want to mention something that I would say for me and for perhaps other folks who've been involved in it, it's felt like a supercharge for me in terms of looking at racial equity. And giving me another lens, because I talked about not working in silos or in isolation in the township, but you want to also, when you're doing this work, is to be able to expand your network outside of the township. One of the very important points that I realized early, based on some of the things that was shared early in my experience in Natick, was to get to know folks, to go outside. And that's been important, whether it's looking at things from a broader Metro West view, but also being able to look beyond and being able to look at organizations on a statewide. And that's been very important. And this is a great example, and it helps to exemplify that in a very powerful way. The REACH program, the Racial Equity Advancement and Collaborative Hub, a regional initiative fostering racial equity, inclusion, and systemic change through collaboration across municipalities. There were 11 municipalities, and the program just ended yesterday, so this is right on time, where we have been working together for about 11 months, coming together. There we had what is called the Natick 9, a group of 9 folks from town staff, as well as 2 great partners from outside of the town staff that joined us for this, what's been a wonderful adventure in terms of the work, helping us to combine data-driven strategy, shared resources, and community partnerships to address racial disparities and advance equity. Engages municipalities, schools, community organizations, and other stakeholders to co-create actionable solution. Supports capacity building. So there's a lot here, but we had a very active group that participated greatly. And by the way, the Natick 9 actually has some historical reference. There was a Natick 9 back in the 1800s that was a baseball rooming house team that lived in Natick. When I found that after, we had the name Natick 9. So you can look that up. It's in the Historical Society link I saw. So I just want to, so this is exciting. These are opportunities, and we've been able to do some really valuable work where we're focusing on, right now, we have a number of things that we're working on, but one major initiative that we zeroed in was working with town staff and being able to look at helping folks to feel a sense of belonging as town staff members. And again, it's important to look at what happens with town staff because that also influences how town staff works outside. And I'm a firm believer in the idea of getting your house in order, as you may also be trying to work in collaboration also. There's a lot of synergy here. So I just wanted to mention that. It's been a great program. There are resources, and there are other professional associations that have been very valuable in this process. That brings us to, some of the current initiatives. What are some of the things that I'm working on right now? As I said, when I started off working here, and I talked a little bit about my journey in the beginning, focusing on listening, being able to hear what the needs were. I know a lot of times people may say, hey, what's your plan? What are you going to do? Well, I like to ask the question, what are we going to do? How do we come together? Because it's a collective challenge. And that's an important part of this process. But it's been that synergy that has been helpful for me. So the community partnerships in Natick have been key in this process. A really good example here is identity-based bullying. I've had a collaboration with Spark Kindness, and I've been participating in the Metro West Anti-Bullying Coalition to address youth needs. Very important, very supportive group doing some great things. We have the hate response framework, partnering with Natick Police, and I have found, communication and connection with the Natick Police Department to be excellent in terms of being able to communicate, being able to connect, being able to look at initiatives. So I just wanted to mention that. And also looking at regional organizations that can help in that process, moving more towards that. But, we're starting locally in Natick. Mobile town hall insights, utilizing lessons learned and to be able to refine the process. While we may call it mobile town hall, outreach is central in the process. So whether we call it mobile town hall or if we take another approach, it's adaptable. It gives us a chance to meet the needs based on what people shared. And we were able to have folks, whether they shared in the suggestion box or in conversation, all those things are important as we move forward with mobile town hall or doing outreach. All right, here's a great outgrowth from the REACH program. We now have, in the last couple months, and we've named it. Now we got to claim it, and we're going to be moving forward on some more specifics now that REACH is over for our EIO working group. And it was members in the group who proposed that as an idea. And I had two colleagues from economic development today to come in and say, hey, we're excited to do this. So again, it's synergy. It's our ability to work together and to have cross-departmental and cross-community partnerships. That's exciting. So advancing departmental integration and developing sustainable equity frameworks. Now, let's mention something in relation to metrics. A town staff survey has been developed, and we are in the process of launching that in early 2025 to assess DEI and belonging among employees. And again, that in part was also reinforced by the focus that we had with REACH, but also based on our own needs to do that. And I want to say this. There was support in this process of getting that survey done in terms of groups and people that I connected with. Folks who have been connected in Natick before. I would say a big inspiration was Wayside Human Services. very supportive in terms of the leadership that I was able to connect with there. All those things are important. So again, public health partnerships, addressing disparities highlighted by the pandemic through targeted initiatives. Again, what is the intersection between people who may have been underserved or particular populations in terms of the impact of the pandemic, being able to look more sharply in that area. I'm working with public health in terms of narrowing that down, but that's another area that's important. All right, so let's look beyond the immediate. Expanding equity and inclusion, future goals. So the Metro West Hate Response Collaboration, so I mentioned building it initially, that we're working within Natick, but we're also moving forward to strengthen regional partnerships from more of a Metro West framework, but also being able to move beyond Natick. But that's important, but we got to start at home first. What are some of the incidents of hate across the Metro West communities, and what are some of the best practices? All those are important. Advancing accessibility, again, we talked about the working group, post-REACH implementation, being able to build from the REACH experience, that's important. Youth empowerment, deepening efforts with Spark, kindness, school-based bullying. I won't read all this, but these are just some of the very important areas that we'll be looking at further as we move along. So let's. Whoa! Hey! I just pressed the arrow.
The cord's a little.
Okay. All right, thank you. You said what? Oh yeah, the bottom one, okay. All right, so again, just folks, I thank you for this opportunity to share, to really think about these ideas and to just share some of the work that we are doing. And this is a common vision. This is a journey that we make together. It's interconnected. Progress is a shared journey that unites us as a community. Every step we take reflects the strength of our collective commitment to equity, inclusion, and outreach. And let's make the commitment that together we can create a Natick where everyone thrives. Thank you.
All right. Before we do questions, just real briefly, just to give everyone a sense of upcoming, because I'm still a marketer at heart, so now I've got to market the next few Natick 101 sessions. We did a quick survey about a month ago. We had 33 responses from folks. Maybe there's a decent percentage that's in the room. These, on the left side, we've outlined January through April. This will all be live on the website. School committee raised their hand. They signed up for January. I'm going to sit with the chair early next week. Once we lock in a date, I'll publish all the dates. The select board and DPW, I'm just going to sort out which one's going to go first second or third. And then NPS will take up April. You can see the survey results. What's in yellow is the top where we're going to focus in the first half of the year. I'm going to give one amazing resident credit. They also said, well, instead of departments, what if you just started doing issues? That was a little more cross-functional, and I tilted my head and said, that person's absolutely right. So I think this survey, that feedback came out of one of these brave 33 individuals, but we might start thinking about topics themselves and figure out how to bring the right departments in. I think Natick 101 is going great. I think year 2 is going to be even better as we just start to get some awareness. Chances are about 3 or 4% of Natick knows that we're doing this, and so we've got to figure out how to increase that. So now just Q&A. We'll start in the room. I think we've got a few online that we'll pepper in, But we'll pass the mic so we can get a decent recording for future viewing. Who wants to go first? In the room, start anyone or? All right, maybe we'll ease us in with online.
What?
And folks, if you're on YouTube, feel free to just send in on the link right on the homepage of the website.
Hi. Thank you guys both for this. It's a tremendous introduction and very exciting about the future directions of you both. What I'm wondering is kind of a broad question, which is how does reaching into the schools and into the students and into the faculty and the staff of the schools affect, I'm thinking particularly, Troy, of your area and the values and the mission and things like that, as sort of that, but also in terms of their use of your many communication tools. Is any of that coming from youth? Can you ever break that out? Do they feel, in other words, do they feel a part of the community enough to want to know what's going on? I know they're young, and even in high school, I paid zero attention to any news at all outside of my campus. But anyway, see what you can do with that for as long as you want to play with it and let other people speak. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll definitely let mine will be more broad. I'll let Troy go into EIO, and just for people's benefit, like Troy and I both have peers on the school side. So I didn't know this until I started this job 2.5 years ago, but town and schools, we are absolutely, interrelated, but we do have very unique organizations. So there's a communications director on the school side. Her job is primarily to communicate with parents and students to a degree, but largely parents, quite frankly. I think it's a great question as to how to utilize the youth and figure it out, where I will say I'm currently doing quite a few things with students, but it's very sporadic. It's not at scale. So for instance, I was at the high school yesterday. There's a Serve Natick, if folks are aware, the volunteer organization, and I meet with the students very informally. But at the same time, the other reason I was there is there's another student who's doing a film project because she wants to build her portfolio to go to college. So I'm working and we're doing a video around that particular student. Additionally, we're standing here in Kennedy, and folks aren't aware, civics action is part of a coursework that 7th graders do at the middle school level. At the high school level, someone could correct me here, I want to say it's junior year, but I'm working across, I started with a Kennedy civics teacher, and then I'm also going to go to the high school in Wilson, because what's happening, these students are doing these projects, they inundate boards and committee members and staff members with very, kind of one-off questions. In fairness to the students, this is how we get them engaged. So why don't we do a better job and work upstream? And so that's what I'm doing as the communications director, working with those individual schools, bringing in department heads, bringing in board committee members to inspire and educate these students. So when they're producing their civics action, they're a little bit more, let's say, polished and practical, that these students can be given some guidance and get exposed to some town leaders. But I think your question might have been a little bit more just broader of how to engage the youth, and I'll let maybe Troy talk about that.
Yes, thank you for asking that question. As someone who has worked with youth in my former life quite a bit, I appreciate that opportunity to connect. I have had some sporadic outreach from students, someone interviewing me from one of the high schools about what equity, inclusion, and outreach is, which was a lot of fun. I had a young graduate student who had contacted me as well and wanted to get my equity, inclusion, and outreach lens on human services from some of their graduate work. She was doing a class project. So I see the opportunity as priceless and a great opportunity. I know both Jay and I participate in the Freedom Team, and there has been a presence of high school students or students who are involved in that. Get to see students in the a little bit, from the King program, the Martin Luther King program that the town puts on. But, I'd love to see that go deeper. I would say the key from my perspective and what I'm doing is being able to make connections with the folks who are in the school department. My counterpart, who does equity and diversity, social emotional development in the school system in Natick, as well as another person who is with Medco. We have some conversations. So there's that hope that as relationships build, we can come together and could do some joint things, because I think the issues around equity, inclusion, and outreach encompasses all people, regardless of the developmental stage.
In the room, or you want to read one?
What steps are you taking to protect EIO efforts against potential litigation? Have any changes been made to those efforts, such as scaling back, ending, or recharacterizing them in response or as a precaution?
So that's a great question. I would. Sure. So, yeah, if you could, Billy, I'd love to hear it again.
What steps are you taking to protect EIO efforts against potential litigation? Have any changes been made to those efforts, such as scaling back, ending, or recharacterizing them in response or as a precaution?
Yeah, my approach to this is to think nationally, understand what the realities are nationally, but to work locally, because I feel it's the local relationships that are going to help to sustain relationships and allow us to move the work forward. From my perspective, I don't see there being any slowing down or hanging back. In fact, I see it, moving in forward. And I also am a firm believer that if you take a strong equity, inclusion, and outreach approach, as you saw with the emphasis on accessibility, it's broad, it's encompassing, and it brings more people in. So again, just to reiterate there's not an attempt to scale back, there's an attempt to move forward, and it is also an appreciation that equity, inclusion, and outreach opens the door for inclusion. It doesn't narrow it down. So I believe in moving full forward. Yep, and continuing. Yep. So, all right. Yes.
Down to one mic. Is there in the room, or we can do one more? Do you want to?
For communications, how does your shift from marketing to communications inform your work with the town?
So shift from marketing communications, referencing my career. So yeah, I did 20 years on the marketing side, and I gave you the kind of differences of those two. I would say at the end of the day, what I figured out over my 20 years was, Bezos gets too much credit for his sort of thoughts on this, but the whole notion of understanding your customer, like I could rattle you off. Staples, we had a 41 million customer record. There, we knew our addressable market of small business customers. I could tell you every single e-commerce metric on that website and what the individual customers purchased, why they purchased, and what they built their small business, because we understood everything. So if I can carry that through and figure out, we have very unique individuals. I mean, it doesn't matter that we all live in the same 16 square miles adjacent to Boston. You can watch, various select board meetings. You can look at all sorts of, very interesting topics that are going to have complex opinions. But I've got to figure out what people's motivations are intrinsically, how they might interact, what their comfort level to sign up for notifications that I keep pushing. If they're not willing to do that, I've got to figure out something else. The only other piece is, like, every single thing I did for 20 years was quantifiable. Like, it was all outcome driven. I could literally figure out what my team did. I mean, I managed a marketing budget at Staples, which is larger than our town's budget. And I knew every single dollar in and what I drove in revenue. And I went to our CFO on a quarterly basis to prep her in order for her to go to Wall Street. And I was the largest line item in our P&L at Staples. And that sort of idea of just figuring out, I currently have a $0 budget, by the way, and I don't need one because I'm a team of one. I don't think I should get another person. I have software dollars that live inside the IT line item. But truly, just that idea of being outcome driven. Like, I'm not doing it to do it. We're doing it to have an outcome. So those would be probably the two biggest items. In the room. go in the room. Is that working?
Hi, thanks. I guess this question is maybe for both of you. That two parts. I guess one part would be West Natick. How can we increase the inclusion there? I'd heard that before. I don't happen to live out there, so I don't know what the situation is. I don't know if it's more rentals or whatever. But so I guess for both of you, that's an inclusion thing, but also a communications thing. And then the second part would be how do you increase participation for people? Like you said, like 10 years ago, you weren't interested in following anything. Like I was the same way. This is my first year of really being active and paying attention. And I think a lot of that has to do with like having like little kids and just being too busy. And then I can't go to a select board meeting there at whatever time at night. That's crazy. But now I'm at a point where I can attend some of these events. So how do you engage people like in that situation where maybe they got kids, they're busy, or just otherwise disengaged? Thanks.
We'll go in order. The West Natick one, I know Troy's going to have thoughts too. So, yeah, when I think I mentioned it earlier, like when I've heard of what we've done in the past, it always feels like an individual person saying, I've gone to West Natick, I've talked to people, but I just don't know how scalable and repeatable that is. So something like the mobile town hall, it was a single event that was purposeful at the Cole Center. The REACH program that Troy mentioned, one of the residents, she was a volunteer using her own time to come to the REACH program. She happens to live in West Natick. She grew up in South Africa, happens to be of Indian descent. And she has a group of 600 individuals who are on a WhatsApp community. So I'm still working with her because I think it's going to be grassroots efforts to find these pockets of amazing humans who don't have the time, maybe don't have the connections. I also think, and I'll let Troy go, different areas, but like, I actually think just defining what our community is with data. Like literally, what is our average tenure of residency by individual, and this is all US Census data. I met with the resident, he's the director of UMass Donahue Center. I mean, one of the preeminent demographers in our entire country, happens to be a Natick resident. I don't know, for whatever reason, he hasn't volunteered. He's a very busy man. But he took me up on a coffee to figure out how to actually source census data and understand our municipality as far as every metric, not just rentals, but household sizes. And then at the end of the day, what are the psychographics? What are the barriers for these people getting engaged? But I think it's going to be grassroots. I think it's going to be meeting folks where they are and putting the onus on us town staff, as well as volunteer organizations that may or may not have extra capacity. But it's going to be hard. I don't begrudge the people that have done these isolated efforts, but there's other items that I think are in the infancy, but I'm figuring out, exactly how to tackle that challenge. I'll let you jump in on that one, and then we'll come back to the harder question.
Yes, from what I've seen and experienced in the process of doing outreach, and for example, West Natick, or perhaps other pockets that we don't know about where there could be challenges, that we want to be present. I think that's important. I think that was one of the important things that I heard during Mobile Town Hall. We're glad you're here. When are you coming back? But also just being able to listen, being able to find out what the needs are, and not assume what the needs are. Where I like the idea of thinking about it in terms of more of a grassroots approach as opposed to a top-down approach, to meet people where they are, get their insight, and also, if at all possible, how can they be engaged in the process? What are some of the ways that they could participate in the process? I can recall a person that I had met during the Mobile Town Hall who mentioned, part of one of the things that they wanted to do was to kind of work on areas of social isolation, where folks can sometimes feel a sense of that, and what are some things that could be done in terms of forming groups that way. So there is a need, but I think there has to be a presence, there has to be a commitment, and I would also say there has to be adaptability. We may call it Mobile Town Hall, and yes, we had the bookmobile that are a gracious partner of the library and other vehicles, but it's not about the vehicle. It's about, the presence. It's about the outreach. It's about being there. And I think just being able to find creative ways to get out there is going to help.
I'm going to come back to the getting folks engaged, but just some other comments to say. I mean, number one of our values, we listen. Literally just listening to West Natick. Like, what is the current situation? I think scaling that is hard. I think understanding, kind of what that current barrier is, and why they might not be coming. Oh boy, what was I just slipped in my other one too. I'll come back to it, but I'll pivot back to the this idea of like, how do we get more people engaged? Myself, I didn't have the time nor interest, quite frankly. I think some of that is going to involve the listening, like what is that barrier? But then what's the value? Like before we get them to come, why would I come? And again, that's a little bit back to my marketing thing is like, why won't they buy that product? Like, what is it? Why are they buying our competitor's product? But in this instance, like, what is the why? And everyone's in this different life stage. And they might, I sometimes struggle when I look at boards and committees, like, what is the outcome? What is like, what is controls? What have been the achievements that a given board or committee's had? And then I can warm up to that idea. This Natick 101 session used to be previously known as a Citizens Leadership Academy, and Natick ran it from 2015 to 2020, 21. And it was a COVID thing where it kind of dropped, but it was a closed application process. And the more that I dug around, I found out that the individuals that were part of that cohort had already known about government. And it was just a little bit of them getting disproportionate access to town leaders and doing that. And I am critical of that. And this effort, and for those that are watching this some later date, we're at Kennedy Middle School, outside of select board members, we have 5 residents. And so it is hard to show up, but you're all going to see this content because Pegasus is here, they're recording it, it's posted, and those families that don't have time can sit on their couch just like they do when watching YouTube clips otherwise and learn about, eventually, every single town department as we build this catalog. But I think where I'm going with this is like, just modernize yourself and be accessible and warm people up to the idea. Too often I see us pop in with a 95-page PDF and say, this is this thing, sign here or sign up for this board or committee. And that's the equivalent of Amazon loading up their homepage with $500 items. Like you have to, you cross-sell and upsell. Like you get them in and get something relevant to that person. So I think like making sure it's relevant and listening to folks. But it's going to play the long game is the last thing, because I don't know. If I didn't take this job, I'm not certain I'd be here. So I need to find more people like me and give them more reasons to show up. Yeah. We'll go to the audience.
I'm going to pose a question for both of you to answer again. Personally, I would like to learn the stories of some of the immigrants that live in Natick. And how would you go about getting those stories out for people? How would you approach the immigrants? Where could you do this? We have Pegasus here. You've just been talking about that. Public library is an amazing space for communicating values inside and outside. What would you do? If I came to you, I mean, this is what I would like to. I would like to know more about the stories of the immigrant populations that have come here and how they feel and what they're doing, what they're contributing to town, making them visible. Thank you.
That's a great question. The first thing that came to my mind, let's get together for a cup of coffee and talk about it. What's that? You know what? I think to some extent most of us are, right? Or at least we have those roots that we can relate to, right? But in terms of the process, I think it involves conversation. And I think it involves us, maybe looking at, how that could be of value for you or other residents, but also how will it be of value to the immigrant that you would want to interview? Because how will they feel in the process? I think that's important because, and how will those stories be used is important too. So I think all that is part of the conversation and how does it contribute to the overall sense of community? I think it's interesting, but I think the intentions and the spirit of it is important, and being able to talk about that and how that could be beneficial to all would be great. It's, I think, an important start.
If I could say it's timely, I probably wouldn't be asking this question if it weren't for the select board, bringing that public policy out in the open. It's made me curious.
Yeah.
I'm grateful for that, along with many other things.
Yeah, no, I think you raise a very good question that deserves further conversation and consideration.
Just a couple things on this one. I mean, this is where our sort of, community organizations, churches, nonprofits. So Natick is United had a Being an Immigrant in Natick. And it was a great event. And it's a really difficult thing to, just expect that everyone's going to want to tell their story. It's pretty personal. So in the case of a nonprofit, NGO like Natick is United, they curated it. They brought a panel of individuals. There was also a film that was at the FCC. So I was part of both of these events. And this is where I think, how much will government do to bring stories? I think we have to lean and partner. So there's a group of, it's an interfaith group that I participate as a volunteer. And it starts to figure out, we literally are starting to brand ourselves, have a naming. It's led by all the churches in town. And I think that could be a lot of programming. Now, as far as in my day job, I think there's an opportunity to source content in a really low-touch way of just tell me your name, tell me your story, tell me the food that inspires you, tell me the hurdles, and produce on the backside some great content, whether it's video or just imagery and upload. But I think that puts a lot of onus on that audience. I think we want to hear that story potentially. And when we talk about immigrants, yes, we all have some degree of immigrants, but I think we're talking about relatively new immigrants to the country. And I think that's kind of that population. And I think that's a big barrier. So I think figuring out what's appropriate for what they want to tell, but like the sentiment is amazing. Like, how do we learn more about our residents and their stories, and even giving them that opportunity to tell it? We might have different dialogue from both sides of the fence. If I was part of the particular coalition that brought this up, I believe, I've heard different years, but 2019, 17, that would have been an opportunity to start telling those stories from that day, because we would have showed up with testimonials, verbatims, and stories about residents. And that's how, when I was at my coffee company, we didn't tell people we had delicious coffee. We had our customers tell our new customers that we had delicious coffee. And we had a persona. She sat in her little nook at her kitchen, and she said what she did with her coffee. She told her story because she was willing to. We sold more product. I would take that same analogy and build something where we can tell it. I think we would have a very different dialogue, and we wouldn't feel maybe as concerned. So those are some areas. I think it's an interesting thing. We're town staff. We roll through select board policy. So ultimately that policy that's being discussed is to change the way the current practice. It's to codify it. So we don't know where that nets out, but I think it's a great thought as to how we tell those stories, and there is an audience.
I just wanted to, and it's such a great question that you're raising in terms of that. I think another thing that comes to mind, and this is where I think the inclusivity part comes in. It's one thing, I think, to ask, let's say, individuals who are immigrants to tell their story. But in telling your story, there's a level of vulnerability. Could be a level of challenge and struggle. And from my conversation, even with folks who may have had the immigrant experience in Natick, there's often a feeling that you feel you don't want to feel appropriated in any way in terms of, I'm giving my story for you to have. And that's why, I think the idea of some mutual sharing. So even though you may not be, not making any assumptions, might not be an immigrant, right now, but if you could go into maybe sharing your generational story, that creates an opening where you can go farther back, and maybe that will help someone to come forward. And then there's an intersection, and there's a real connection of exchange, which I think in the long run helps to foster more of a relationship, as opposed to, I'll tell my story, what are you going to do with it? Because there have been times when I've been asked to tell my story. It's not an immigrant story, but it's like, what's going to be done with that story now?
One or two questions from anyone else before we wrap? Anything that's trickling in online? Or maybe in the room?
to know more about the conversation you had about the census and what your vision is for that. I'll just say that in light of this whole select board thing, I tried to get statistics for the town of Natick from 1850 for every decennial census to the 2020, and I got about a third of the way compiled, and I did 1850 myself because there's not that many pages to look at. But I was like, well, how come there's no compilation at the library or the town hall or the historical society for foreign-born people? Like I wasn't looking like nationality. I was just looking where people were born, and I think it's between 10 and 20% all the way back to 1850, but I don't know for sure. Anyway, so I'm just curious.
Yeah, the effort that I was talking about, there's a Facebook post where I literally titled it a half-baked idea, so it's truly that. But the idea is I came from a world where every conversation, you didn't get let in the room unless you had data. And I feel like right now, government, we celebrate participation and opinions, which is great, but it's often not grounded in data. And unfortunately, we can state data, and that becomes fact because it's a record. There were references last night that I found myself fact-checking. And so my whole concept is I want to have a half-baked data bake where you sit around with U.S. Census data and all of these opinions or thoughts, we all just look at unbiased data. Well, this is the demographics in Natick. This is the tenure. This is a fun fact. I always forget the exact number, but between 30 and 40% of our residents didn't live here 7 years ago. There's a natural churn. We have on average about 40 new home purchases per month. I mean, that is a pretty small number. And that number is pretty static. I know that, there's interest rates change and, mortgage rates. But like even at the peak of everything, it went all the way up to 80. You could go door to door 80 times in a month. That's not that hard. Other communities do that. That's the welcome wagon, if folks remember that from earlier. So like there's this idea that like if you just start with that data and that fundamental fact, and people say, well, we've been talking about X topic for Y number of years. A lot of these people didn't live here. And then I struggle with the idea, I grew up in Florida. I struggle the idea that because I grew up in my hometown, that they owe me something. And and I struggle with the idea of like, because you've lived here so long, I owe just as much as the communications director to someone who just moved to Natick yesterday. As someone that's lived here for decades, they both deserve our resources. Same taxes. And so I struggle with that idea. I just want to lead with data. And I think we have some amazing residents because we've got decent household income. We're pretty close to Boston. Got some great minds. And how do you find those individuals? And don't tap their time, but just tap their brains. So that's kind of the idea behind it. We'll see if it works. One more question.
Just a quick, comment. This has been a great program, this Natick 101. I've really enjoyed it. And it would be neat if you could do some sort of like condensed version for like high school students or something like that, so they could really appreciate where they are and have that grounding as before they go off into the world. Then also for communications, I'd appreciate in this day and age, we all get bombarded with ads and stuff and with too much information. And I appreciate if communications can be concise and clear and action oriented. I do get frustrated when I get some communications from places that just throw in the kitchen sink and like here are like 100 things that are happening or whatever. Like, well, what's the one thing you're trying to communicate? Like, please focus on that. So that's all. Thanks.
Yeah, no, brevity wins generally. These are some great conversations. The idea of like this is content we're creating. It could be for students. We want to take this for internally. I really don't know what all the other departments do. They really don't know what I do. This same content, we have 39 slides in here, 20 per 2 departments. So it could be for schools, for residents, for coworkers. But appreciate you guys for showing up. And like I said, school committee in January of 25. We'll figure out the other sessions. But subscribe to the notifications for Natick 101, and we'll keep you updated. Thanks, guys.